Happy Friday, YouTube, or whatever day you're watching this. Help us out, like this video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We have 2 days of baseball to recap up next on Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aarondola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosu, Tacano, and Fado. Value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Clubs, tips up Connor Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday, and welcome in to Fantasy Baseball today on September 23rd. He is Scott White. I am Frank Stampfl, and today on the show, we've got 2 days of baseball to recap. Zach Wheeler and Luis Severino are back. We've got a few prospect promotions. Do they matter? And Week 26 sleepers. Scott, before we even get into the action, I did notice that your Week 26 sleepers are for basically the final week and a half, right? So
yeah.
And why
yeah,
is it
10 days.
And why is it like that? Just asking.
Because I assume that's the last scoring period in most leagues.
Yeah. I mean, I'd imagine for most head-to-head leagues, roto lineups, you probably still set twice, I would imagine, next week and then the short week after that. So it's weird because we're playing 3 extra days of baseball, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday into October because of the holdout, because we got started a little bit later. So that's why it's kind of like the schedule is broken down weird this late in the season. But in case you're wondering, that's why we won't have our full allotment of, fortune favors the brave and all those kind of fun things because.
It is abnormal for the season to end on a Wednesday. Pretty much always ends on a Sunday. And, obviously that goes back to the lockout and them having to start the season later. That means an extra series was tacked on to the end. And so that's why we get kind of this awkward finish. But that's a good point. Let me check. Okay, so I'm checking my roto leagues here. Because there would be, I mean, look, even in a head-to-head league, you could make 1 3-day scoring period at the end, or just eliminate those 3 games altogether.
True.
I am checking though to see, let's see, I'm not finding this very easily. Advanced schedule editor. Let's look at that. Okay, so even in roto leagues, at least on CBS, it looks like the default is to have that be just 1 long scoring period at the end.
All right, fair enough. So that is the reason why we're doing it that way. And that means most, not all, but most pitchers will have 2 starts next week. Let's get into the past couple days of baseball.
Oh my goodness gracious.
All right, Scott, you are up. We were talking beforehand, and you have chosen the Olive Garden breadstick. Who is it?
It's Kyle Bradish.
Oh, yeah.
Kyle Bradish had another great start. He's had a few of these lately. It was against the Astros. Came within an out of a 2-hit shutout. It only ended up making it 8 2/3 innings. Did not allow a run. Struck out 10 against the Astros of all teams. Despite having 10 strikeouts, he only had 11 swinging strikes, which isn't particularly impressive. And his swinging strike rate for the year isn't particularly impressive either. But now, in his past 6 starts, Kyle Bradish has a 1.64 ERA and a 0.78 WHIP. Only 7 strikeouts per 9 innings. So I'm generally reluctant to buy into a pitcher who is bad at strikeouts. Like, you can be just okay at strikeouts and maybe be good, but to be not very good at strikeouts, like, generally the only way you get away with that in the modern game is you're either exceptional at generating ground balls and or an exceptional strike thrower. And so far, Bradish has been neither of those. You look at his numbers in the minor leagues, though. So he only got 6 starts there this year. But last year, 11.8 K per 9 between AA and AAA. Let me see if I can look up the swinging strike rate real quick, because sometimes strikeout rates can be deceptively high or low in the minors. So okay, and in the minors last year, it was only an 11% swinging strike rate. So that's interesting, even though he had more than 11 K per 9. And I should point out also his whip was really high last year in the minors because the walks were so high. So control issues here with Kyle Bradish, not an exceptional. He's okay at ground balls, but it's not like he's a standout in that area. So I'm not seeing a lot to get excited about here, even though he's had the success of late. There will come a point, like if this spills over into next year, if he continues to do things like this, where I'm going to have to take him seriously in spite of that. But right now, I'm not particularly motivated to move Kyle Bradish way up the rankings or anything like that.
Shout out to the Orioles, man. What they've done with their pitching staff this year. I know the alterations to the ballpark definitely have helped in that regard, but that doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, you don't turn around this drastically just by moving the wall back. But a lot of their pitchers have turned out to be fantasy viable, mostly as streamers throughout the course of the season. But Kyle Bradish, once again, amazing in this start against the Astros. And I did have numbers over the last 6 starts, Scott. 1.65 ERA.
I already gave him.
Oh, there you go.
You can give him again.
People
may not have been listening to me.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I should have been listening to you. That's the problem. But I do find it kind of interesting that despite having a pretty solid swinging strike rate during that stretch, he's not getting more strikeouts. Sometimes it happens that way for pitchers. Like maybe they're sequencing, they just can't finish batters off in that way. But I think, based on his swinging strike rate, maybe we should see a little bit more strikeouts from Kyle Bradish. He is 21% rostered, and his last 2 starts at the Red Sox and at the Yankees. So while, again, amazing start, not sure that I want to trust Kyle Bradish with those 2 matchups in the final week of the season. So maybe you can do it in like deeper leagues, but your traditional 12-team or points leagues, probably not adding Kyle Bradish there. Oh my goodness gracious, for me is one Kolten Wong, 3 for 4 with a triple dong here on Thursday, which brings him to 15 home runs. He also has 15 steals on the season. He's been Kolten Wong, rock solid middle infielder, hits around 250. Again, little pop, little speed. I thought he would have had better counting stats, frankly, because I thought the Brewers were going to be a lot better. Don't tell anybody, but they were one of my World Series picks coming into the season. Not great, but he is 78% rostered. Could be out there in some shallower leagues, Scott. Let's say 12-team points league. He's available. Is he someone that maybe you would look to add in a shallower format for this final week and a half?
I missed the name. Sorry.
Kolten Wong.
Kolten Wong. Okay, so let me look at the matchups here for the Brewers. Kind of middling.
Yeah, they're not in your best or worst matchups. So I was going to ask you where they kind of rank in that.
Yeah. There are other second base eligible players I'd recommend ahead of Kolten Wong if you're looking for them, and if you're looking for one, and we'll get to them a little bit later in the show. He's in 78% rostered. I think that basically sums it up. That's the kind of player he is, where it'd have to be a pretty deep league for me to call him a must start or even must rostered, but at the same time, you could do a lot worse.
I was so surprised, Scott, to see that Whit Merrifield was still rostered in 80% of CBS leagues. I know he was drafted early, but the guy has not been playing consistently. Now, that might change because Santiago Espinal went on the IL, and Whit Merrifield did hit a double dong here on Thursday. So maybe he could finish out strong, but man, I was surprised to see he was still rostered in that many leagues. Let's just say, final week and a half here. Would you rather have Kolten Wong or Whit Merrifield?
I would rather have Kolten Wong because at least he plays with some regularity. Yeah, I mean, Whit Merrifield, I wrote about him in a Dynasty Stock Watch the other day, and he's not a young guy, so maybe it's weird to write about him in a dynasty stock watch. But I just think what Merrifield's done as a fantasy asset. I mean, maybe at some point next year he'll be he'll get enough playing time that he could be, I don't know, like a 15-team steals specialist. But I don't think he's going to play enough to be this like integral part of a fantasy lineup. The Blue Jays just don't seem to have that kind of use for him, and he's not at an age where they're going to take a longer look at him next year if they're not using him in that role now.
The Blue Jays will have a 2023 club option on Whit Merrifield, and his base salary is $2.75 million, which is pretty low, with $4 million worth of incentives. So I think he'll wind up back with Toronto, but maybe it's not a guarantee. We'll see what happens here in the offseason for Whit Merrifield. Let's talk more about some waiver wire pitchers, Scott. We mentioned Kyle Bradish here up at the top. I think the other two names that really stand out, just from a shallow league perspective, Hunter Green, strong start once again against the Brewers. He went 5 innings, 2 runs, 8 strikeouts in that one, 21 swinging strikes, 16 coming on the fastball. He is 70% rostered and looks like his final 2 starts at the Pirates and home against the Cubs. Marcus Stroman is the other one. Again, shallow league, 65% rostered. He did turn in a quality start on Wednesday against the Marlins. He went 6 innings, 3 runs, 7 strikeouts. And in 14 starts since returning to the Cubs, I believe he was on the IL before that, 2.87 ERA, 1.14 whip for Marcus Stroman. So I know he's had some ups and downs, but overall the collective he's been pretty good dating back to July or so. Scott, who would you rather have? Hunter Green, Marcus Stroman, and I don't know, let's throw Kyle Bradish in that mix. Would he rank over either of those?
Oh, no. Those two would definitely be ahead of him. In fact, Hunter Green and Marcus Stroman are both among my sleeper pitchers for next week.
Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Green, like these 2 starts off the IL, he's looked as good as he has all year. In fact, I know the 11 strikeouts last time out was his new high. And follows it up with an 8 strikeout performance. I mean, in 5 innings, that's really good. And then he gets 2 amazing matchups the final week of the season. I'm presuming you're treating it like one long scoring period. You mentioned Pirates and Cubs. Now, there is some uncertainty how the Reds are going to handle their rotation. They could go 6-man with Graham Ashcraft coming back. I suspect they won't, that they'll bump either Chase Anderson or Luis, former Yankee. What's his name? Luis
Sessa.
Yeah, Luis Sessa. They'll bump one of them, is my suspicion. But it's possible Green doesn't make that first start against the Pirates and instead he makes 2 starts against the Cubs. That'd still be really favorable.
All right. I do have 4 other names here, more so for deeper leagues, Scott, but Mitch Keller turned in another quality start against the Cubs. He went 6 innings, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts in that one, 29% rostered. Jordan Lyles threw a complete game against the Tigers on Wednesday. He allowed 3 hits, 1 run, 6 strikeouts, and even with that, his ERA is 4.50 on the season. He's 36% rostered. James Kaprielian has allowed 2 earned runs or fewer in 5 of his last 6 starts. The one that he didn't, he allowed 8 earned runs. So I'm not sure that we are in love with James Kaprielian. And then Hayden Wesneski, he's looked very good so far for the Cubbies. Came over in the Scott Efros trade with the Yankees. And he went 6 1/3, 2 runs allowed, 6 strikeouts. And he's just 11% rostered, Scott. More so deeper leagues than anything, but you like any of these? Mitch Keller, Jordan Lyles, James Kaprielian, Hayden Wesneski.
I don't think I like any of them for next week. Double checking what Keller's matchups are.
I have the Reds and Cardinals.
Yeah, those aren't. Well, Cardinals are pretty tough. Pretty good matchup in there, a pretty bad matchup in there. I think he's usable. He's had 5 straight quality starts now. This is Mitch Keller we're talking about. 5 straight quality starts. It's with a 2.03 ERA. An even 1 whip, and an even strikeout per inning. And just pretty good numbers. It's one of the best stretches we've ever seen from Mitch Keller. But he does pitch for the Pirates, and he's Mitch Keller, who's driven us crazy all year. I don't, I'd rather not be in a position where I have to even consider him. And he isn't among my 10 sleeper pitchers for this week. But he is possibly trending a good direction here. If we think about him maybe being an asset on some level in 2023. Hayden Wesneski is maybe the most exciting of this group. Again, not so much for the last week of the season, but just in terms of, he's reached the majors and has looked really good right away. Now, when you look at the underlying numbers, the things I like to lean on, like ground ball rate and swinging strike rate and all of that, there's not a lot that stands out there. And even in the minors, he wasn't a big strikeout pitcher, but the scouting reports they expressed an optimism beyond the production that I think has to be factored in with Hayden Wesneski, especially as he's finding success. I'll also mention here James Caprillion because he has had back-to-back good starts and an arsenal change during that time, throwing his slider more. That may, there may be something to it. I'm sorry, that wasn't the arsenal change. He actually has been throwing a sinker more and dispensing with the four-seamer, and he's had some vulnerability to the long ball, so that kind of switch might make sense for James Caprillion. And I mentioned him also because he has two good matchups final week of the season, Angels and Mariners. Wasn't good enough to get him in my 10 sleeper pitchers for next week, but it at least had him on the fringes. So if you're in a deep league or really desperate for volume, I don't like James Caprillion that much, but you could at least think about it.
Talking about his pitch mix reminded me a point I wanted to make about Kyle Bradish is at least in this start, he completely faded his fastball and he went heavy into his slider and his curveball. And he did increase his sinker usage. So if nothing else, that slider looks like a pretty good pitch for Kyle Bradish, but we'll see if he can obviously build off that down the stretch here. I did want to ask you about Dustin May, Scott. We got an email asking about whether we need to hold on to Dustin May for his final two starts, which looks like they're at the Padres and home against the Rockies. So, frankly, pretty good matchups, but he has not been good himself. He gave up 5 runs over 4 innings pitched against the Diamondbacks, and now in 6 starts, Dustin May has a 4.50 ERA. The FIP, the XFIP, both over 4 as well. He's walking way too many batters, over 4 walks per 9. What do you think about Dustin May? Do we have to hold him, or can we maybe drop him for a Hunter Green or Marcus Stroman set?
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather start either of those two in the final week than Dustin May. I do think there is some danger of you dropping him, somebody else picking him up and getting 2 great starts out of him. But, you only have so much roster space. And if you have a better use for that spot, I think it's okay to drop Dustin May. Just not in a position where we can trust him right now.
I'll tell you what to do, Scott. You drop him on Sunday night so that he can't be picked up by another team. If you want to drop Dustin May, that is.
True.
Let's talk about a few other waiver wire hitters. Kolten Wong, obviously, we mentioned 78% rostered. I have a few other shallow league names. Josh Donaldson showing some signs of life here down the stretch. He went 3 for 5 with a run and an RBI. His last 15 games, he's hitting .276 with 3 homers and an .824 OPS. He's 68% rostered. Taylor Ward also coming back to life. His last 15 games hitting .377, 2 home runs, a .980 OPS, 67% rostered for him. And Joey 2 hits. That's right. Joey Meneses. He went 2 for 4 with his 10th home run on Wednesday. Now batting .328 with .927, a .927 OPS. So you know what, Scott? You could take your tough matchups, and Joey Meneses is going to mash against everyone. It doesn't matter who they are.
Continues to clean up all of our messes. Joey
he
Meneses.
is 51% rostered. How would you rank those 3, Scott? I guess just for the final week and a half. Donaldson, Taylor Ward, Joey Meneses.
Well, I actually have ranked them for the final week because 2 of them are in my 10 sleeper hitters and 1 was slightly left out. So I rank them Joey Meneses. Again, the matchups aren't great, but he's hitting .328 with a .927 OPS. So I'm kind of wondering if we should just give him the stud treatment at this point even though he's only 51% rostered. And, I'm not saying he's a stud for next year or anything, but like he just continues to get it done. So Joey Meneses 1, Taylor Ward with this strong finish and really good matchups for the Angels next week. So they're playing 9 games, 6 of them against the A's and the other 3 against the Rangers.
Nice.
And the Yankees are pretty good in matchups next week too, but Josh Donaldson missed the cut just slightly.
All right. Well, speaking of those Yankees, I do have 3 names in deeper leagues, and Oswaldo Cabrera is coming to life recently as well. He went 2 for 5 with a grand slam on Wednesday. That was his 3rd home run of the season. He added 5 RBI in that game. He's 9% rostered. He's got second base and outfield eligibility. Matt Wallner, someone who kind of stuck under the radar here, Scott. I missed this one. Apologies. The Twins, number 5 prospect in their organization. He was called up last week, and he's playing pretty well. 7 games so far. He's hit 320, 1 homer, and 890 OPS. Pretty strong numbers in the minors as well this season. He's only 2% rostered. The name there, Matt Wallner. And Edward Olivares, who I don't know what the guy needs to do to just get a chance, but it looks like he's getting a chance once again. I feel like every time this happens and he plays well, the Royals just find a way to send him back down. But he hit his 4th home run and has started 5 straight, has at least 1 hit in each of those games. So any interest, Scott, again, deep leagues, 5 outfielder, 15 teams, something like that. Oswaldo Cabrera, Matt Wallner, and Edward Olivares.
I wrote about Matt Wallner in the final prospects report, which was no-name prospects for deeper dynasty leagues. That's how I kind of framed it, and I included Wallner in there. And I hadn't noticed he was called up either.
I just flew under the radar, right?
I think maybe a lot of the news aggregators out there have devoted a lot of their resources to football or something. So baseball is just getting short shrift, and that's because Matt Wallner is not the only one I've noticed that with. It's like, oh, that's actually a prospect I've heard of. Why did I not hear about him getting called up? But yeah, Wallner is again, he's a no-name prospect for deeper dynasty leagues. Really good power, really good walk rate, a lot of strikeouts. It's kind of like an Adam Dunn sort of profile. And Adam Dunn had a, long career of fantasy relevance. He was kind of a punchline at times, but he was a quality fantasy option for a long time. And I'm not saying Matt Wallner is going to live up to that, but that's the kind of profile he has. He despite hitting 277, he had a 412 on base percentage in the minors, 27 home runs in 128 games. And I think he ended his time in the minors on a tear. Let me double check that. So I was pretty interested in him as the season wound down. But am I going to recommend him for the final week of the season? It'd have to be like a pretty deep 5 outfielder league for me to think about it. Twins matchups aren't bad. They're not particularly good either, but he has been playing every day, Wallner, since being called up.
So in 13 September games in AAA rather, Matt Wallner hit 333 with 2 homers and an 1100 OPS. So yeah, he was pretty hot down the stretch. A name that you can look at in deeper 5 outfielder leagues. Again, Matt Wallner with the Twins. And I do have some other prospects here, Scott. Ezequiel Tovar does indeed get the call by the Colorado Rockies. The problem is that he's going to finish out the rest of this week in Coors Field. But if you play in a weekly league, you're not going to get any of that. And then the Rockies don't have any more home games after this. So
yep.
I don't know how excited we should be about this, but Tovar, a great prospect. I think like a top 10, top 20 fantasy prospect, considered by many people at this point. He hit 316 with 14 homers, 17 steals in 71 games between AA and AAA. Do you have any interest, Scott, in adding Ezequiel Tovar?
It would have to be a pretty deep league and probably a daily lineup league, I think, for me to devote a roster spot to him. Not only are we not going to see him at Coors Field, which maybe isn't that big of a deal because he's such a high-end prospect and he hasn't played at Coors Field yet, so he's not going to have that Coors hangover. He's not going to suffer from that at this stage of his. This might be the only time in his career where he's not going to feel that influence. So it may go fine, but then you run into the fact, okay, you're in the most important time of the year, you're putting a guy who you haven't seen play a major league game yet in the lineup. And we don't even know how much the Rockies are going to play him. Like, is he here to become their shortstop, or do they just kind of want to let him get a feel for what it's like to be in the majors? Maybe they'll play him 2 or 3 times down the stretch, we don't really know. So it's just happening too late to care, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. And he was promoted on Thursday, not in the lineup. So there's nothing more Rockies than them calling up one of their top prospects and then not playing him down the stretch. So that would not surprise me either. We know that they have fumbled many young players over the past couple of seasons. A few other names here, Scott, and ones that I do know that you like because we spoke about them on FBT in 5. Miles Mastrobuoni is with the Tampa Bay Rays, and Will Brennan, an outfielder with the Guardians. They were both called up here. Not sure how much either one is going to play.
Yep. Will Brennan was another one I missed. I just noticed that today. Oh, when did they call him up? How did I miss that? He was both of these players, so Mastrobuoni and Will Brennan of the Guardians, not to be confused with Will Benson, who's another outfielder who was promoted earlier this year. Brennan is better, I think. He went 2 for 4 in his debut. Kind of a Stephen Kwan profile. I have a feeling that's a comp I'm going to make with a lot of players over the years. I've made it for Sal Frelick of the Brewers before too. It's basically means really good contact skills and enough speed to be a factor in stolen bases. And, the limited ceiling with that profile, but potential to be a useful fantasy player. If he plays enough, but that's still a big if. I think all of these guys are coming up too late for us to really get any use out of them this year. Plus the Guardians they face 5 left-handers in their 9 games next week, and Brennan being a left-handed batter, that makes it even less likely he's going to play all of those games.
Okay.
Mastrobuoni, it's a little less clear what kind of player he's going to be. Speedy, versatile. I think super utility is his role, but how many at bats that translates to, particularly with the Rays, it's hard to say. He did start to show a little bit of pop this year, but I don't really think that's going to be his game.
Yeah, I was going to say, so he's basically a Tampa Bay Rays player, Scott.
Yeah.
Super utility type that, could put the bat on the ball. He's got a little pop. He's got a little speed. It feels like they're always finding these players. So just a few names to remember. Let's see. Maybe if they play over the weekend a bit, then maybe you do pick them up in deeper leagues for the final stretch. Again, Miles Mastrobuoni and Will Brennan. And if it's more contact you want, Rob Manfred, I think we're going to get it, at least on the Guardians, between Brennan and Kwan. And then you mentioned Sal Frelick coming up with the Brewers, hopefully sooner rather than later as well. Before we hit the break, I do want to let everyone know the schedule for next week. Of course, we will have 4 podcasts for you, and we'll be live on YouTube Sunday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night. So we won't be around on Monday night. There's only 4 games on the schedule on Monday, so it feels appropriate to skip that day, if anything. And you will have an audio podcast in your feed Monday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, and Friday morning of next week. Let's take a break, and we'll hit the news and notes here on Fantasy Baseball Today. The news and notes. Julio Rodriguez exited Thursday's game with that recurring lower back injury, and he will go for an MRI on Friday. Not great, because obviously he's been so instrumental in getting people this far in either their playoffs or their roto standings, high up in the roto standings. And we need Julio, but we'll see what happens over the weekend for him. As a result, Jared Kelenic, well, you know what? Kelenic was recalled even before this injury, so it's not as a result. But Kelenic was recalled on Wednesday, and I guess he could see more playing time if Julio is out. And Kelenic went 2 for 3 with his 5th home run on Thursday. It was an impressive one, Scott. 108 exit velocity, 427 feet for Jared Kelenic. And
it was at that launching pad, I'll note.
Oh, in
Oakland. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. I feel like we've said this before, Scott. We need to see it happen in the majors, but he was playing very well since getting sent down. He had 33 games at AAA, 307 batting average, 7 homers, 6 steals, a 16% strikeout rate. That's exactly what we need to see. We need to see more contact for Kelenic. So he's 28% rostered. What do you think about him in a deeper 5 outfielder league for the final week and a half?
No, No, we need to see it at the majors. Like
Yeah.
his problem is the classic case of trouble with the curve. He can't hit a breaking ball, and I don't know how. It just kind of slipped by on all the scouting reports. I don't think it really became apparent until he started facing them with the frequency that players do in the majors. And it seems like it's only gotten worse and worse with every return trip there. It is nice to see him cut down on the strikeouts in his most recent stint in the minors, but like it's not like for the majority of his minor league career, strikeouts have been a big problem for him. So ultimately, it's going to be a sustained stretch of success in the majors that makes Kelenic worth using again.
Ronald Acuna was scratched on Thursday due to mid-back tightness. Trevor Story was finally placed on the IL with that left heel contusion retroactive to September 19th. And I would be surprised personally if we see Trevor Story again this season. Aaron Boone said Wednesday that the Yankees will go with a closer by committee approach. And I would imagine that includes Aroldis Chapman, Scott Efros, who was just activated, and Clay Holmes, who did pitch the 9th and 10th innings on Thursday, and he wound up with the win. And he looked really good. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think like Boone is just giving himself an excuse not to use Holmes if he feels like he's not feeling it that day. Oh yeah, I said I was going to use closer by committee, but I do think he's kind of rooting for Holmes to recapture that role heading into the postseason.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, Aroldis Chapman pitched here on Thursday, and he was not good. I think he recorded 1 out, and he walked 2. He threw 16 pitches, 10 of them were balls. He just same old issues for Aroldis Chapman. Freddie Peralta could return this weekend against the Reds. He's been out since September 8th with shoulder fatigue. Santiago Espinal was placed on the IL with a left oblique strain. Mentioned Whit Merrifield in the lineup Thursday with a double dong, so hopefully he can get hot these final 2 weeks. Brandon Nimmo was removed Wednesday with left quad tightness, and his MRI came back clean. David Bednar was activated by the Pirates and could be available in some shallower leagues. He's 66% rostered. What do you think, Scott? You're looking to re-add David Bednar if you need either saves or a relief pitcher in a points league?
I don't know in a points league that it's a huge priority. I would say if Jose Leclerc doesn't matter to you, I like Bednar a little more than Leclerc, but not that much.
Okay. Ryan Nelson was placed on the IL with right scapula inflammation. Unfortunate because he was pitching well for the Diamondbacks. Andrew Benintendi is not expected to return before the playoffs. He's on the IL with a broken hamate bone. Seiya Suzuki is not expected back this weekend as he awaits the birth of his child. Yandy Diaz has missed 3 straight with left shoulder soreness, but did receive a cortisone shot recently. And hopefully he can get back on the field because he was mashing in the second half. Drew Smiley will make his next start either Tuesday or Wednesday against the Phillies. Will likely make his next start on Tuesday or Wednesday against the Phillies. And he was scratched this week with left shoulder fatigue. Mike Soroka was placed on the minor league IL with right elbow soreness and will be shut down for the rest of the season. We have not seen him pitch in a major league game since August 3rd, 2020, mostly because of the Achilles injuries that he suffered. But this stinks, Scott. I mean, obviously we're rooting for the guy so much that he's dealt with the past couple of years. I want to see him back on the field. He was, frankly, one of my favorite pitchers when he was coming up, Mike Soroka, and it's just kind of unfortunate that this keeps catching up to him.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unexpected to have some soreness in the elbow after ramping it up again all that time away from the game. So it doesn't sound like the Braves are terribly concerned from a long-term perspective. They're treating Mike Soroka's finish to 2022 as a success. And he's going to be competing for a job next spring, I would guess.
Trevor Rogers was officially placed on the IL with a left lat strain. He'll miss the rest of the season. Joey Wendell also placed on the IL with left hamstring tendonitis. I did have one other prospect note I wanted to mention, Scott. Cedane Rafaela, who is a prospect in the Red Sox organization, was named the minor league player of the year by Baseball America. And this season in the minors, he hit .299 with 21 homers, 28 steals in 116 games between high A and double A. And I haven't checked to see how much he's rising in prospect ranking, Scott, but I would imagine it's going to be quite a bit. Again, the name there is Ceddanne Rafaela.
Yeah, he's going to be on top 100 lists next year. I mean, he's already been added in the ones that have been updating. Kind of a weird prospect. He's short and he doesn't walk much at all. So the bat, well, on the one hand, the bat really needs to come through because he doesn't walk much at all. On the other hand, he's like a tremendous defender in the outfield and can play the infield too. Like I think that's where he started out, but he's moved to the outfield and is just outstanding there. So that's going to give him a higher margin for error. Did I say that right? Higher margin. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that he has, and I realize 21 home runs in 116 games. I don't know that Ceddanne Rafael has the kind of raw power that's needed to be an impact player in fantasy these days, unless he's going to be like an elite base stealer, which is possible. I don't know. I have some questions about the upside for our purposes, especially since the defense is doing so much to boost his prospect stock. But he's clearly a prospect of note now and somebody whose name you should commit to memory.
Again, that name is Ceddanne Rafaela. And I think it's a good point that you bring up, Scott. Just when we look at general prospect lists, MLB Pipeline or even Baseball America, I believe is just, their general prospect rankings. They're not fantasy prospect rankings. You got to keep that in mind, that some of these guys are ranked highly because of the defense that they provide as well. I always remember Christian Pache, Scott. He always ranked so highly in prospect rankings, but he wasn't a very good offensive player. So I think he almost got overvalued at times because of that.
Yeah, I mean, there was optimism for him that he would grow into more of a impactful offensive player, and obviously that didn't happen. It did happen with somebody like Francisco Lindor. Like when Francisco Lindor was rising to the majors, it was mostly his defense that was elevating his prospect stock, and eventually the bat did catch up. And obviously we know him as a great fantasy asset these days, but it does happen sometimes. It's not an exact science projecting these prospects, and that's why there's a lot of misses along the way, but in both directions, overrating them and underrating them.
Scott, I'll never forget back in the day, I was so convinced that Orlando Arcia was going to be the next Francisco Lindor.
I made that exact argument.
I had it all figured out. I was like, he was a defense prospect, and same thing as Lindor. He's going to come up. He's going to be awesome. And he had some moments, but ultimately didn't come to fruition for Orlando Arcia. Let's get into our week 26 preview. Again, this is for the final week and a half combined. So every team plays between 8 and 10 games over the next, what will start on Monday through the following Wednesday, which I believe is October 5th. October 5th. So we're just going to jump right in, and we'll start off with the sleeper pitcher. Scott, who are you looking at for that long week and a half?
Well, before we get into that, I want to make a brief introduction here. If you'll notice behind me, we have a new lamp here in the corner of our living room.
Nice.
People like to critique our living room decor. They have a lot of complaints about how we make up our living room here in the White household. And one of their complaints was the lamp. So, apparently my wife didn't like it either. A big box came in the mail today, and I was like, what is this? And it's a lamp. She unpacked it today and set it up and was giddy. She said, I love lamp, apparently.
Nice.
In her mind. She didn't say it out loud, but that's she loves the lamp, and hopefully you do too. Okay. So having said that, can you even see it?
We could kind of see it.
There's a throw pillow blocking it. Too many throw pillows, man.
Yeah.
All right. And
do you want to go unplug it and just bring it over here, and I'll just
no
time in the meantime? No, you don't.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
I figured I would offer,
Okay. So sleeper pitchers. as we already discussed, Hunter Green is on this list. Pretty much they're all 2-star pitchers with one exception, because it's probably something like 70% of all pitchers, if you are treating the final 10 days like one scoring period, pretty much like 70% of all pitchers are going to be making 2 starts. So you should have a lot of starts in your lineup. So I like Hunter Green, obviously, with those 2 matchups. If it's not Pittsburgh in the first start, then it just means he'll be facing the Cubs twice, which is good either way. John Gray's looked good since returning from the IL, continues to build up innings. One good matchup of the 2 this week at Seattle. And he also has to face the Yankees, but I think John Gray's good enough with 2 starts. You should consider him. Alex Cobb gets the Rockies. Of course, that's in San Francisco because the Rockies are done at home after this weekend. And he's at San Diego for his second start. And Alex Cobb has been really good for several months now. Patrick Sandoval gets the A's twice. Gotta like that. Jose Quintana gets the Pirates twice. Gotta like that. The 1-star pitcher is Nick Lodolo. He was a little shaky against the Red Sox last time out. Didn't get knocked around or anything. And of course, we've been hyping up how well he's pitched lately. He is at the Cubs, his final start of the season. So only 1 start there, but worth using, I think, if you don't have a lot of studs lined up already. We've talked about Marcus Stroman. His matchups are so-so, gets the Phillies and Reds, but he's among pitchers who are available in enough leagues to qualify for this list. Marcus Stroman is one of the better ones. The Deep League Special, I'm going to call him because he's only 10% rostered, is Cody Morris, who we've highlighted a few times. Barely pitched in the minors this year and was kind of like getting stretched out again with his promotion to the majors. But he did go 6 innings in his most recent start. He's looked good this whole time. His matchups the final week are against the Rays and against the Royals. So 2 good matchups. Not saying everybody needs to use him, but he's 90% available. So if you're hurting, you can feel pretty confident Cody Morris is going to be out there for you. Rounding out the list here, I have Bailey Ober, who's kind of a deep league special himself. He gets the White Sox and Tigers. Might only be a 5-inning pitcher, but those are 2 good matchups. And I did put Jack Flaherty on here. We haven't mentioned him yet. He had his best start so far on Thursday. 2 earned runs in 6 innings, 9 strikeouts, also 4 walks. That was at San Diego. Velocity was up across the board. You know, you don't like to see the walks. I'm still not sure we're ever going to see ace Jack Flaherty again, but his final matchups at Milwaukee, that's okay. And then at Pittsburgh. So we're at the bottom of the list here. It's not the most full-throated recommendation, but Jack Flaherty did make the cut for the sleeper pitchers this week.
I'll tell you what, Scotty, I do like seeing Cody Morris on this list because picked him up in Tout Wars last weekend. So I picked him up for his matchup this week against Texas, which I believe will come on Friday. And then, of course, you do like those 2 matchups next week. I'm going up against our guy here, Greg Jewett, in the finals of Tout Wars, Scott. I'm trying to go for the back-to-back championship, and Greg has made a furious comeback against me. So I'm going to need all the help I can get from Cody Morris and the rest of the squad. Let's get into the hitter matchups for next week. And the best matchups go to the Mariners, the Angels, the Reds, the Guardians, and the Blue Jays. And the worst hitter matchups, the Rockies, Diamondbacks, Padres, Braves, and the Rays. With that being said, Scott, your sleeper hitters for basically the rest of the season.
Gunnar Henderson. It feels kind of like cheating putting him on this list now, but he technically qualifies, only 73% rostered. He just keeps looking better and better and is eligible at both third base and shortstop. So there's probably a way for you to get him in your lineup. Maybe not in shallower head-to-head leagues, and that's fine, but everybody else should probably have him in their lineup now. Elvis Andrus, of course, is on the list still. I should mention for Gunnar Henderson, the Orioles are one of how many teams have 10 games? Just 6? 7 with 10 games. One of 7 teams with 10 games.
Okay.
Elvis Andrus, the White Sox matchups are pretty good. And of course, he's just been on fire, even contributing stolen bases now. We talked about Joey Meneses. The matchups could be better, but whatever. He just keeps getting it done regardless. Here's an interesting one. Luis Rengifo. Of course, he's been on a roll lately himself. And I mentioned the Angels are at the final week of the season. They get the A's 6 times and the Rangers 3 times. But what's especially notable for Rengifo, 4 of the 9 pitchers on the schedule for the Angels are left-handed. And Rengifo this year is batting .338 with a .973 OPS against lefties. And he's versatile. Like I said, he's hot. It's going to be really easy for you to get Rengifo in your lineup to take advantage of that. His teammate Taylor Ward is here. He's having a really strong month of September as well, as you pointed out, Frank. I don't know that I have the updated stats, but I think he's hitting like .330 in September with a couple home runs. Oscar Gonzalez is here. The Guardians have good matchups again. Vinny Pasquantino is here because, of course, he is. Carlos Santana gets a spot on this list for the second straight week. The Mariners actually have the best matchups of all, as you mentioned. They're one of those 7 teams playing 10 games. And Carlos Santana's been hitting a bunch of home runs lately. All right, I got a deep league special here, too, for the hitters. Kerry Carpenter, Tigers rookie outfielder, who is beginning to produce in the majors, kind of like he did in the minors. He is a left-handed hitter, I should mention. Only one left-hander on the schedule next week. I'm sorry, 2 left-handers in 10 games for the Tigers next week. So 8 righties on the schedule. He should play a lot. And he's homered 4 times in his past 11 games. Or is it 12? Because the Tigers played today.
Did they?
I don't think they did. So yeah, 4 times in his last 11 games. Kerry Carpenter, probably wouldn't consider it outside of deeper 5 outfielder leagues, but he's only 9% rostered. So that's your deep league special.
You said this person's name, Scott. Vinny Pasquantino.
Never heard of him.
No. He usually goes by something else.
Vinny P, baby.
All right. Now it all makes sense to me. Vinny P, baby. He is on the sleeper hitters for the final week of the season, and that'll do it for our not for the podcast. We still have other things to do, but basically our last schedule planner preview for the next week. Our next preview will be previewing the next season, I guess. We have all off season to do that. Let's get into some pitcher returns here, Scott. Zach Wheeler made a successful one up against the Blue Jays. He went 4 shutout with 3 strikeouts, only had 3 swinging strikes on 58 pitches. So that was curious, but everything else looked good. The velocity was way up across the board. His fastball was up 2 miles per hour. His curve was up 2.5 miles per hour. He did throw his fastball quite a bit, did not use many breaking pitches in this one. But Zach Wheeler's final 2 matchups at the Cubs and at the Nationals. And Luis Severino returned on Wednesday as well against the Pirates. He went 5 innings, 1 run, 6 strikeouts in that one. His velocity was also up 1.1 miles per hour on the fastball, 1.5 on the cutter. And his final 2 matchups at the Blue Jays and versus the Orioles. What did you see from those 2? And are you comfortable putting them back in your lineup, Scott?
Yeah, I think everybody should probably start them. They, everything looked good for them in their return, which, Luis Severino actually got something of a rehab assignment. It had been longer since we'd seen him. We hadn't seen him since before the All-Star break, I don't think. So it was especially encouraging the way he came back. But, just to put it into perspective, if I was, of course, they're 2 rostered, both Wheeler and Severino, to qualify as sleeper pitchers. But if I was ranking them along with the sleeper pitchers for next week, Wheeler would be number 1. Then Hunter Green, my actual number 1, would be number 2. And then Luis Severino would be number 3. So only one of my sleeper pitchers is even in the discussion here alongside Wheeler and Severino for the final week of the season.
All right, let's get into the rest of the pitching standouts. And we'll start with Wednesday. Scott, there was a lot of really good pitching over the past 2 days. I know I mentioned on, I think, Tuesday night that pitching was kind of like scuffling recently down the stretch, but man, these pitchers just turned it back on. And one of those was Lance McCullers, who makes it 3 straight quality starts. He went 7 innings, 2 runs, 8 strikeouts at the Tampa Bay Rays. Jesus Luzardo, double-digit strikeouts for the second time this season. Up against the Cubs, he went 6 2/3, 1 run allowed, 11 strikeouts. Kevin Gausman gets back on track, 6 shutout innings with 8 strikeouts at the Phillies. And Tristan McKenzie, awesome start. 8 innings, 2 runs, 13 strikeouts to 0 walks up against the Chicago White Sox. The Guardians went in to Chicago and swept the White Sox. They now have a 7-game lead in the American League Central. Shout out to the Guardians. They, they are getting it done down the stretch. So McKenzie, Gausman, Luzardo, and Lance McCullers. Scott, anything you'd like to add on those 4?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't sure what to make of McCullers at first. It was a pretty serious injury he was coming back from, and he didn't seem quite right, but he seems to be on track now. And he's always been slightly less than a must-start pitcher in fantasy, but like right on the cusp of that. And I think, let's see, did you mention his matchups for the final week of the season?
I did not.
So let's look at that real quick. Arizona, that's pretty good. And then the second one would be Brewers. Is that
Brewers.
Right? No, not Brewers. Sorry. Second one would be the Phillies.
Let's see what I have him for, Scott.
Yeah, Phillies.
I have,
Diamondbacks, Phillies. So, kind of middling matchups there.
Right.
I'm not going to say he's must start, but I again, it's another situation where I'd start McCullers over John Gray, who was my number 2 sleeper pitcher. So, yeah, good chance you'll start him.
Scott, I know that you will be waiting on pitching next year, at least, early on your first 2 or 3 picks. Maybe you're looking at hitters. And of course, because I'm like a mad person and this is all I think about, I'm starting to think about my strategy for next year already. I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, what's going to be the optimal draft strategy in 2023? And I think I will also target hitters early and then target some of these like quasi aces where they're not valued as aces, but they might have ace upside. And I think Tristan McKenzie just falls in that category.
Oh, yeah.
Zach Gallen is another one who, I mean, he probably is just an ace once again. And we'll get to him in just a little bit, but just some of those names that I think will go in the middle round, Scott, who have that ace-like upside. And I think McKenzie is one of them.
Yeah, Tristan McKenzie, I talked about the Dynasty Stock Watch I wrote earlier. He was one of the risers because I think he is. I mean, this was as good as this start was, 13 strikeouts, 23 swinging strikes. He actually had a 14 strikeout, 25 swinging strike effort just like a month ago. So he's been, this wasn't foreign to him. And while the fly ball rate makes me a little nervous, it's something I think he can navigate in this new environment, and that actually becomes an asset for him. So I agree. Like, starting pitching is, I mean, you mentioned Zach Gallen is, you could call him an ace now, but he's an ace that I'll have trouble ranking in my top 20 at the position, just because there are so many that I think have maybe higher ceilings than Gallen. And I mean, there's plenty of starting pitchers to go around. I was actually ranking my first 2 rounds for next year, and that's another article you can find on cbssports.com. I kind of just wanted 19 straight hitters at the top. Now I was ranking specifically for 5x5 scoring for like a roto league. Points league might be a little different, but I don't really. My first pitcher doesn't come up. I did slot DeGrom in 18th, 1 spot ahead of Vladimir Guerrero. I don't even know that I feel great about that, but it's kind of just a clump of pitchers there at the end of round 2. Because I'd rather that the high end hitting seems scarcer and harder to manufacture later in the draft. Which for the vast majority of the time I've been playing fantasy baseball, that's been the case. It was weird during the juice ball era that pitchers were so valuable by comparison. And partly that was because home runs were so well distributed among hitters, but we're clearly coming out of that and back to a more traditional more traditional the way how valuable pitchers are versus hitters.
Last point on Tristan McKenzie. His curveball is amazing. 116 batting average against a 46% whiff rate. And Fangraphs has this function where you can look at specific pitch values for every pitcher. And among qualified starting pitchers, Tristan McKenzie's curveball ranks the best in Major League Baseball, ahead of Shane McClanahan, ahead of Kyle Wright, ahead of Charlie Morton. How good that pitch has been for Tristan McKenzie. I do have other pitching standouts from Wednesday, Scott. Part 2, Logan Webb gets it done in Coors Field. He went 5 1/3 shutout, only 1 hit allowed, 5 strikeouts in that one. He did throw just 66 pitches, so I'm kind of concerned about how much volume we're going to get from Logan Webb over these final 2 starts. Robbie Ray put together another great outing at the A's, 6 shutout with 7 strikeouts. Miles Michaelis, another great start at the Padres, 6 innings, 1 unearned run, 6 strikeouts in that one. And Blake Snell might be another one of those quasi aces, the way that he is finishing the season. Put up a season high 13 strikeouts over 7 shutout innings against the St. Louis Cardinals, traditionally a team that has been very good against left-handed pitching this season. Velocity was up for Blake Snell. His last 15 starts since July 1st, 2.76 ERA, 1.16 whip. The FIP, the XFIP all lines up with it. 121 strikeouts over 81 2/3 innings pitched. 13.3 K per 9. Blake Snell, I had him as a bust coming into the year. It looked right in the first half. It has been dead wrong in the second half, Scott.
I know. He's faked me out 2 years in a row. I've written him off, and then he's come storming back at the end. So, I mean, that makes me a little worried that he's going to be bad to begin next year, too. And
Maybe.
I'll lose all faith in him. But the 29 swinging strikes Blake Snell got on Wednesday were a career high. Wow. A guy who's won a Cy Young before. And yeah, he was he was proud of himself after the game for hitting 99. Apparently that was a new number for him. And that's what he took away from this start, which maybe tells you a little something about Blake Snell, but that's fine.
He's kind of an interesting dude. If you've ever seen interviews with Blake Snell, I'll leave it there. Interesting is the word I would use to describe him. But nonetheless, he has pitched extremely, extremely well since the start of July. And I think he'll wind up being another one of those mid-round starters. Where exactly? I don't know, round 5, 6, 7, something like that. And all right, just load up on a few of those guys and hope like 1 or 2 of them hit, and that'll help your pitching staff for next year. Thursday pitching standouts, part 1. Jack Flaherty, I was going to mention, but you already talked about him, Scott. Jose Barrios, man, fool me once, shame on you. But I feel like he does this over and over where he gets blown up. We're out on him. And to your credit, Scott, I'm pretty sure you said that you were just done with him anyway. But then he'll put together a stretch of like 2 or 3 quality starts. And I start to think, all right, like, yeah, can we get Barrios back in our lineup now? And then boom, he gets crushed again. 6 earned runs over 2 innings pitched at the Tampa Bay Rays. So there's one on the bad side, and on the good side, Brandon Woodruff was lights out at the Reds. 6 innings, 1 run, 11 strikeouts in that one. What do you think about these two, Scott? Barrios and Woodruff.
I mean, Woodruff's been quietly great for a
yes.
long time now, and he's just kind of gotten lost in the shuffle of aces. You know, after doing that exercise yesterday, plotting out my first couple rounds and some of the players I had left over that I know are going to comprise round 3. I mean, I'll probably be able to get Woodruff in my round 3. Like, I'll probably be able to rank him there, but it's going to be tough. Like that, and that's more the state of pitching and pitching versus hitting than anything about Woodruff himself. Because my point is, like, Woodruff is still like a true ace. I feel like one of the more bankable ones, and yet I don't know that I'll be drafting him as early as round 3 next year. And yeah, Barrios. It had actually been 5 quality starts and 6 for Barrios, but got the ERA back over 5 with this start.
Oh, gosh. Absolutely brutal. 5.27 is the ERA for Jose Barrios. Scott, I think if you expand it to a 3rd round, like if you're projecting the first 3 rounds, you should just go all hitters first 2 and then all pitchers in round 3. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, that would be...
It'll never happen, but it's just a fun exercise.
I do think there comes a drop off in the hitter ranks where it's appropriate to start taking some of those very best pitchers.
Mhm.
But if push comes to shove, I don't know that I personally am going to do that. I might just my first 5 picks are hitters or something like that. It depends. Obviously, haven't actually sat through a draft before, seen what everybody else is doing, but I could see it going that way.
Absolutely. I did see that Jacob deGrom was your first pitcher in that article drafted, and I know how good he is. I am here to tell you, I will not be drafting Jacob deGrom next year. I just don't fool around in the early rounds, but obviously it comes down to your risk tolerance. I'm sure we'll have Chris on in January and he'll be like, "No, you got to take Jacob deGrom. Injuries aren't real." And
well, he was I was the only one arguing for deGrom. I mean, I eventually backed off, but early on this year, before when we didn't know he was going to miss time or anything, I was Chris was more pessimistic about deGrom than I was. But yeah, personally, it's tough because if you rank exactly the way you personally will do things, then your rankings will be hard to take seriously at times. So you kind of have to navigate that, like, okay, what's as low as I can get away with putting this guy. I don't really want to draft deGrom next year, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But sorting out the top 7 pitchers, like I feel like I could put them in any order basically and be and feel like it's the right order. So currently I have deGrom number 1 among those 7 just because I think he is the best pitcher in baseball. Just how durable is he? Not very in recent years.
No, he has not. The last 3 pitchers I wanted to mention, Scott: Justin Verlander, another quality start at the Orioles, 6 innings, 2 runs, 4 strikeouts for him. Shane Bieber, just doing Shane Bieber things at the White Sox, 7 2/3, 2 runs allowed, 5 strikeouts. And Zach Gallen was awesome once again at the Dodgers, 8 innings, 1 run, 13 strikeouts, 0 walks. Anything on these 3, Scott? Gallen, Bieber, Verlander.
Not really. They continue to do their thing.
Fair enough. And let's get into just a few hitting leftovers that I have here. I was just looking up Stephen Kwan, his post All-Star break numbers. And let's see if I got this right. No, that's 12 steals. All right. He had a sock in a shoe on Wednesday. So Stephen Kwan has just been really, really strong here in the second half. Batting .318, 4 homers, 12 steals. I get it. He's not a huge contributor. And look, he doesn't contribute much in power in terms of categories leagues, but in points leagues, I think Stephen Kwan is like absolutely a top 30 outfielder drafted next year. Just how much contact he makes leading off and obviously finishing the season as strong as he has. He's going to be really, really good in that format. Vlad Jr. and Manny Machado both reached the 30 home run threshold over the past 2 days. Machado went 1 for 2 with a sock and the shoe on Thursday, his 30th home run, his 8th steal. Scott, are you looking at the rundown right now?
Yeah.
So you see, I was going to ask you.
Oh, no, I don't know that I
all right. Don't look at the rundown. When do you think Manny Machado's last stolen base was before Thursday?
Oh, I know he hasn't been running much. And it looked like he was at first. So I'm going to say it was in May.
May 20th. Are you kidding me? This guy went 4 months without a stolen base. What?
Yeah, it happens. I mean, Vladimir Guerrero has been the other way. Somebody was trying to convince me on Twitter that Vladimir Guerrero is going to be a 15 to 20 steal guy next year.
I mean, I wouldn't, 5 to 10.
I mean, I have made the case that, the rule changes are going to make stolen bases more accessible to everybody, and we'll see a lot more 20 steal guys. But if Vladimir Guerrero is among them, then everybody is going to be a 20 steal guy.
Yeah, that is true. Gleyber Torres, I wanted to mention, massive game on Wednesday. He went 3 for 4 with a double dong, and he has come back to life. I know he was slowing down there for quite a bit in August, but last 15 games for Gleyber, he's batting .317, 5 homers, 3 steals during that time. Corey Seager extends his career high with his 32nd home run. Brian Reynolds finishing up strong. He went 3 for 3 with 2 doubles and his 7th steal. Last 15 games for him, .350 batting average, 3 home runs, a .959 OPS. And Run, Randy, Run, Arozarena, really strong finish as well. He went 3 for 4 and picked up his 32nd steal of the season here on Thursday. Some bullpen updates, Scott. On Wednesday, we saw Kyle Finnegan pick up his 11th save. Alexis Diaz picked up his 8th save. Domingo Acevedo struck out 1 for his 4th save. So those 3 are all pretty widely available if you do need saves this time of year. Other names not available. For the Astros, Ryan Presley picked up his 30th. For the Royals, Scott Barlow picked up his 23rd. And for the Padres, Josh Hader picked up his 34th save. He now has each of their last 5 saves. So very clearly, Josh Hader is back in that closer role for San Diego. On Thursday, Jose Leclerc picked up his 7th save, and he is 22% rostered. Scott, give me your... How many do I have here? 4. Actually, just rank them. Kyle Finnegan, Alexis Diaz, Domingo Acevedo, Jose Leclerc, if you need saves.
Jose Leclerc, Kyle Finnegan, and Alexis Diaz, Domingo Acevedo.
They're all pretty terrible teams, so it's not even like you could just rank them based on who's the best because, again, they're all not good. For the Royals, Scott Barlow was unavailable. On Thursday, Brad Keller struck out 2 for his 1st save. For the Giants, Camilo Doval picked up his 24th. For the Cardinals, Ryan Helsley pitched in the 8th inning with a 2-run lead facing the heart of the Padres lineup. He did give up a home run to Manny Machado. Giovanni Gallegos then pitched a 9th for his 14th save. For the Cubs, Brandon Hughes recorded just 1 out in the 7th inning, and then Mark Leiter Jr. recorded the final 7 outs for his 3rd save. For the Orioles, Felix Bautista got the final out for his 15th. For the Phillies, David Robertson was unavailable. Jose Alvarado picked up his 2nd save. And for the Guardians, Emmanuel Clase picked up his league-leading 37th save. Remember how slow of a start he got off to, Scott? I think he had like 2 or 3 saves in all of April. He's just been lights out since.
Yep. Yes.
All right. Streamers for the weekend. We've got Friday, Javier Assad at the Pirates, Josiah Gray at the Marlins, Dean Kramer versus the Astros, John Gray versus the Guardians, Cody Morris at the Rangers, and Marco Gonzalez at the Royals.
I guess the start for Morris at Texas over the weekend will determine really if he's a sleeper pitcher for next week. I would prefer to start John Gray against the Guardians. But Cody Morris might be my second choice.
All right. On Saturday, we have Domingo Germán versus the Red Sox, Bailey Falter versus the Braves, Eric Fetty versus, at the Marlins, Wade Miley at the Pirates, and Davis Martin versus the Tigers.
I'd be tempted to say Miley if his last start didn't go so poorly. So I don't think I want to start any of these guys.
I don't blame you. And then on Sunday, we have Luis Ortiz going up against the Cubs, Adrian Sampson at the Pirates, Jose Suarez at the Twins, Aaron Savali at the Rangers, and making his debut to the program, Brian Beowulf at the Yankees.
I think this group's even worse than I think I'd rather start Wade Miley than anybody here. That's not saying much.
Yeah, you're probably right. I'm intrigued by Luis Ortiz and Savali at the Rangers, but it is kind of dangerous this time of year. So proceed with caution. We'll make that our Fortune Favors the Brave streamers of the weekend if you really need them. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today. We'll be back again on Monday. Bye-bye.